I'd like to pose one last question from me to all of you, really, which is, what are the most important skills necessary for an international school teacher today? What skills should international schools be identifying or developing within their teachers or within their recruitment to ensure that they're meeting the well-being, learning, technology, diversity, equity, justice, inclusion, etc., to ensure that they're meeting all those needs? What skills do they need to be looking for in teachers, or do they need to be specifically recruiting for? Richard, can I throw it out to you first?
Sure, because I think this is an incredibly important question for school leaders, that the type of person they're looking for is going to be different, very different in the next few years even. Right. Tony Little, I referred to him before, he talked about this when we were chatting to him on that show, and he talks about the classic physics teacher. Maths science is my background, so I can sort of, pick on the maths science type teacher, and the idea that, physics, you have this massive amount of knowledge and you're imparting that knowledge on the children in your class, and that those days are gone. And very soon, with the advent of AI and the access that students have to information around the world, the teacher's focus is really to guide and support. Therefore, what is it? What are the skills? What is it the teacher's going to need? Well, the children now, I think, and it was Jane Larson said, for a young person to learn, first they have to be doing well, as in their well-being. And so teachers will need the skills of social and emotional intelligence. They'll need the coaching, the counselling skills. Coaching, I know, is very, very important. And when I think Nick's talking about the coaching, not in terms of the sport coaching there, but more around the coaching as in you're the person asking the right questions so that people are coming up with their plans and their goals for themselves. This is what the teachers will have to have as their skill set going forward. And I'm not talking about a long time away, I'm talking now. And school leaders will be looking for people that are bringing that into their school community when they're doing the recruitment.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. Kyra, do you have anything that you'd be looking for when you are hiring for those purposes?
Sure, yeah, and I'm going to flip it as well and talk about the skill sets necessary for leadership too, because I think it works both ways, right? But I totally agree with Richard. That mode of being the imparter of knowledge has changed, and now the most forward-thinking schools. I think of the Learn Lives. It's a curriculum-free school here in Barcelona. They have learning mentors or learning guides, not teachers. And that's a really important but subtle shift that we are going to be looking to students to drive their own learning, use learner agency, and develop skill sets that they know more about in some cases than we do, because they're already more connected to the future of technology in some ways and in some areas. So I think some of the key skills for teachers are going to be first of all, self-inquiry. And I think this is going to complement hopefully what Nick will be talking about, but to have mindful listening skills first and foremost, to be able to hear the needs of their learners, to be able to respond and anticipate things that will happen in times of crisis. And then I think for the leadership side of things, giving teachers or staff the time, building in the time for the students and for the staff to reskill, upskill, and continue to learn. Because if we are working in places of continued learning, we think of ourselves as lifelong learners, then we need to build in time for all of us to upskill. One really, really cool idea that I think it was David Price was talking about was building in learning time for the staff in schools as well as the students, in order so that we might be able to learn new skill sets so that we can keep up with the sheer pace of change. So if we need to take a quick course on AI or machine learning, that we're given time to do that, just as you would in a really genuinely forward-thinking work context in any business. Or that might be time for self-care. That might be time to go and do something completely unrelated to your day job. And take care of yourselves. And I think the best examples of the leadership that's been shown by teachers during this crisis has been people who took on, really, really interesting things like extracurricular classes or just fun things to do with their students that built communities of learners and put them together in different ways. So people who ran cookery classes or had painting or drawing workshops, or who connected with their students over mental or sexual health. That coaching element and that support as counselors, mentors, guides is what the children need from us and the adults in their lives right now more than ever. And I think I'll leave it there. I have loads of other things I could add, but conscious of time.
No, it's really interesting, and I think that concept of time to spend on well-being, whether that's learning, training, or even just doing something that brings you pleasure and well-being in yourself, is it's a really interesting one. A lot of the heads that I've talked to this year have been, the conversations have often reflected two polar opposites. One, which is we're trying to upskill our teachers desperately in order to keep up with the events of the last year, and others who've said simply, we feel our teachers are overwhelmed. We're here to support them, but we're not asking anything of them this year. Whatever they need, we'll do it, but we're not putting pressure that you have to complete X number of courses, or you have to do, I don't know, courses on phonetics this year. It's about survival, and I think there's,
and trust, right? That was a huge theme that I think came up, and I think probably Peter will cover that in the end keynote. Trusting teachers. Sophie mentioned it before. The algorithm. Why an algorithm when we could have just gone to the teachers who knew the students best? Trust them, let them get on with their jobs, and equip them with what they need.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sophie, is there anything you'd like to add about the skills that schools should be looking for in their teachers going forward?
I think probably a lot of agreement with the past guests, but I had jotted down digital and sort of agile ways of working. So the fact that there's always more tools to put in your toolbox, and also that there's been a huge upskilling in digital anyway over the last year and a half, but capitalizing on that. Emotional IQ. So I think another panelist mentioned that, but and working as a connector and a coach. So I think sort of Kyra mentioned right at the beginning the idea of sort of project-based learning, and I mentioned before sort of Schumacher College. What they do is a lot of their courses is around ecology, around sort of different models of sort of new economics, that kind of thing. But developing their communities of learners in a similar way, they cook together, they do projects together on the campus, and obviously they weren't able to do that during the last year or so. So what they did is try and embody some of those values by connecting their learners online with alumni in their own countries. And I think for international schools, being that connector of industry, of other people that have gone through the school with the same values, and connecting those communities of learning is really important. And then finally, being a part of that coaching is also about helping learners to sort of embody the idea of self-directed learning. And I think what's quite interesting and slightly concerning at the moment, so a lot of the online learning that's available is great, but it does disproportionately hold up those who have that skill set in self-directed learning. And if you don't have that sort of cultivated, then a lot of the tools and a lot of the opportunities in digital might fall by the wayside. So I think sort of teachers that can act as that coach and can develop that idea of self-directed learning, of developing that motivation, so that we can make the most of the digital learning opportunities as well, either alongside school or beyond school. That's kind of what I jotted down. So
that's really great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And Nick, I'll come to you now. We've talked about, well, two people have talked about coaching. I don't think there's anybody better to come to talk about coaching. I'm going to expand the question a little bit for you, Nick, though, if I might. We've got a question on the chat about leadership and what advice you'd have for those who are in leadership positions for their own well-being, as well as the hiring and looking for new teachers and what you're looking for there. Any thoughts you'd like to share on those?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing lots about coaching, and I'm really, really privileged to get to work with school leaders all over the world and with coaching. And there's so many different definitions of what coaching is. Everyone seems to be talking about it, whether it's instructional coaching, whether it's leadership coaching, whether it's wellbeing coaching. And I think there's a lot of conversation about it. And I'm going to shamelessly plug a book that I'm hopefully coming out this summer, Touch Wood. It's about building a coaching culture. And I think just going back to what Richard said, I mean, I do a lot of work around the core content framework in the UK, teacher standards, curriculum, etc., etc. But essentially in coaching models, you know, everyone's at the grow model, the clear model, the positive model, etc., etc. And I think it's about holding these lightly. It's about the skills that go into it. You know, and I've been very lucky enough to, again, to lead schools in the independent sector and the state sector and international schools. And I've worked with teachers who don't have a PGCE or qualification, and they've been absolutely superb. I've also worked with people who, you know, had PGCEs, very qualified, and they just haven't been a great fit. So I think in terms of all of this, I think there's a big, and it may not be a popular thing to say, but it's about self-responsibility. That's what coaching is about. And about, you know, the best coaches make themselves redundant. So I think it's about focusing on the skills that you have with coaching, whether it's, you know, the questioning, whether it's the paraphrasing, the summarizing, the listening, all these different core fundamental skills before you then go into the systemic work, which is about group and team coaching, which I think every panelist has spoken about, to then get things going and to get people collaborating, co-creating, etc. Then the final kind of domain is just transformative domain, where really, as I mentioned at the beginning, to bring things full circle, there's not really a hierarchy. It's about dialogue and fruitful and meaningful dialogue. And it's things maybe a little bit blur between your professional and your personal, as we've seen it going forward. And if there's one thing that's come back to me of a coaching school over the last year and a half, is that they don't put themselves forward enough. They don't look after themselves. Right. And, you know, and again, it's not a popular thing to say, but they're up to here with compassion, because they don't look after themselves. All the teachers are taking on all this stuff from the students, the parents, the teachers, and it just can get too much for them. So one thing that I find works quite well, and this is not mine at all, it's by I went to a fantastic talk by Dr. Laura Watkins, and she looked at neuroscience and about a personal agility toolkit, and she spoke about trying to get brain-friendly environments for leaders, both in education and beyond. And it is about having the coaching skills and coaching yourself, but she looked at different aspects. So she looked at the head, so having time to look at your thoughts and your focus, and that's about things like visualization, growth mindset, etc. Then she spoke about your heart and engaging with your emotions, harnessing your emotions, emotional labeling, gratitude. Then she spoke about the breath, deliberate breathing, attention. You know, lots of spoke about mindfulness, good and bad, depending on, you know, on the situation, meditation, breath control. Then she spoke about the body, things like making shapes, exercise, internal attention to how you react to situations. And the final one was hand. And that was the one that she really focused on, about having writing, marking, doing something inspirational to you, being creative. And I think if you can get those 5 different things into your day-to-day or your kind of monthly plan, research has said, according to Dr. Laura Watkins, that's going to, you know, give you a lot better perspective on life, a lot more agility. And I think as school leaders, it's very easy to come back to the isolation, because you always give, and it's a very giving profession, education, isn't it? But it's actually about looking after the environments that you as a leader work in yourself, to then allow you to have an impact and to, you know, on the school, but also, you know, there's no point you being stressed and trying to look at all this chaos when you yourself aren't centered.
Thank you.